Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of GameSpot's Aftermath, where we kind of look at the big topics and issues that come as a result of these big conventions and expos that we usually go to. In this case, QuakeCon, where Maxwell McGee, GameSpot Associate Editor, saw The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim.
That I did.
That you did, and I'm also joined by Ryan McDonald, who also attended QuakeCon.
How's it going, man?
Good.
Hey.
So, Maxwell, I have to ask you, obviously I'm a huge Oblivion fan. I love that game, put so many hours into it. Based on what you played at QuakeCon and what you saw, I mean, what's kind of your feeling? Do you think, Skyrim's going to be able to replicate that sort of, I don't know, that required amount of time?
That's something that makes you want to go into a game and drop 120 hours into an experience. I think that's definitely what the developers are aiming for with this game. From what I've seen of Skyrim, it doesn't look like they're trying to reinvent the entire the series. This isn't like a reboot or anything like that. They're basically just taking what people like about the old games and just maybe adding a little bit more, a couple extra features, a couple of of course, a whole new area to explore.
What's your take in terms of the one sort of element about the game that kind of stands out? The one thing where you're like, okay, obviously they're using the Oblivion Foundation, they're building off of it, but what kind of just jumps out at you right away?
Yeah, the one thing that really jumped out for me when I actually got to go hands-on with the game is getting to play around with the new combat mechanics that they've been talking about. Because, of course, in the old games, you just sort of ran up, you just wailed on whoever you were fighting against, and, you just kind of hit and win. In this one, I played with a 360 controller, and you get to control each of your arms independently. So throughout most of my time with the game, I had like a hand axe in one hand, I had a fireball spell in the other, and those were each mapped to one of the trigger buttons. So I could run up to a dude, wail on him in melee, block, sort of jump out of the way of his attacks, and then if I wanted to, I could run back behind some rocks, get in some cover, pop out, shoot fireballs, and just sort of go back and forth between these two different tactics on the fly, and that was a lot of fun.
So kind of improved combat is what sort of sticks out.
Yeah, the combat was definitely a little more involved for me as a player.
And it seems like too, based on the trailers and stuff and the information that I've been reading on GameSpot.com.
As you should be.
Yeah. Is that they're also trying to make the world seem more natural, trying to make it, seem more alive, I guess. Do you get that sense from what you've seen so far?
Like every panel they had at QuakeCon, they probably got maybe about 5 minutes in, and somebody had to say
before
Skyrim.
Somebody name dropped Skyrim.
Yeah, always got applause. Everybody was all excited about it. And the one thing they said, as Max was thinking about that world, there's very few franchises that you get to do the stuff that they're trying to do with what they're doing now with Skyrim, and that's and they mentioned Star Wars. It's got this huge giant arc to it. They talked about how important those stories and those characters are to what they're doing, and really whether it was the Origins panels where there's a bunch of guys sitting around talking about their favorite games, and it all led back to Skyrim. I mean, it's funny because they were talking about these old games and how somebody today is sitting there for the first time, and what if for somebody Skyrim's going to be the first game they play, and think about that experience to what then they'll be expecting after that, or 10 years from now, versus the first game you played, was probably what, Gunfighter for the Atari 2600 or something, right?
No, I was Pong, dude.
Oh yeah, there you go. Sorry. Yeah. But long story short, my message is you really couldn't get through a panel without somebody saying Skyrim and then riffing on about how excited they were for probably about a good 15 minutes.
What do you think is the appeal of these games for people? I mean, it's just become such a huge series, but what is it about it?
For me, and I think you get some of it obviously with the way they do Fallout, right? Fallout 3 certainly, and Vegas, is the way that, in that 120 hours, there's just so much stuff that you can just literally wrap yourself you literally wrap yourself with that whole world and everything around it. They talked about it, and again in one of the panels, there's stuff in Fallout 3 or certainly Elder Scrolls that you pick up that you really don't need, but because you can, you do, and that's kind of cool. And so for me, I think it is just the fact that it is as deep as it is with all the different things they have running, that you do get unexpected things and different experiences depending on where you go and how you play it versus somebody else playing it.
Maxwell?
I think for a lot of people, it's just about having a game that lets you get lost so completely in this virtual world. Because I know for me growing up, obviously we didn't have your fancy Skyrims and your Elder Scrolls, but when I would sit down and play something say a Chrono Trigger or Earthbound or an RPG like that, I wouldn't even pay attention to whatever the quest line or the story was. I would just go in and pretend I'm living the day in the life of this character, and I would just go around and make up my own story. And so yeah, I think for a lot of people today, it's just about sitting down, getting into this world, getting invested, and just sort of losing yourself.
Well, sounds good. Certainly Skyrim, one of the big games scheduled to come out later this year. As always, you can check GameSpot.com for more information.